Hey ratbags, it's Jade, welcome to my Dying Light 2 review. I've sunk 50 hours into the game, done the full story content, bunch of side quests, mostly just roaming around, seeing what the game has to offer and the mechanics at play. I generally only do reviews if I have to warn people that the game's so terrible to avoid it, or if it's an absolute fantastic game and I want everyone to go and try it for themselves. Forgive the thumbnail being maybe a little bit more dramatic than it needed to be, but Dying Light certainly isn't either of them. It's not a masterpiece, but it's also not a mess. It's somewhere in between. If you love open world games, you love the usual stuff of side quests, missions and a big map to explore, you're going to like Dying Light. If you are someone that's maybe stayed away from these types of games but thinking it could draw you in, nah, this ain't going to be the one to convert you. So watch the review, agree, disagree, let me know in the comments what you like and what you dislike most about the game, and let's go. Okay, a little controversial, but I think for most people that like open world RPGs, a lot of you don't really care about the story. Like, it's nice if it gets you feels and you enjoy the characters and stuff, but for many of you, you just want something to sink your teeth into for a good amount of time. If a game has all of their mechanics, it's got great interesting stuff, the story, while you want it to be good and keep you going through the first stages, it isn't the most important thing. And that is definitely the case in Dying Light 2. Story actually starts out well. I am kind of led through it a bit more softly than the first one, which I've not played extensively, maybe only a couple of hours. I was too heebie-jeebies with the zombies, I really didn't like them back in the day. And I feel like this game does a better job of taking you through the mechanics of the game, introducing people and doing it at a better pace. But boy oh boy, does that quickly go out the window about halfway through. Not in terms of gameplay, the mechanics again spoon-fed to you, almost like this is a first game for someone that's never played an open world RPG before. But the story just goes downhill so massively. Whether it's related to what faction I chose, which I went Peacekeeper all the way, it feels like major changes and cuts happens with this story as you progress. Characters that you'd met early in the game that seemed important, you don't meet until the very end again, and you're meant to care and really respond to what they say and do. And you're like, bro, I've not seen you for 20 hours, where you been? Honestly, it feels like someone has jumbled parts of the story up. There's characters like main enemies that I swear I only ever heard of or seen just once before the big reveals at the end where basically they get their ends coming to them. I'm being vague, obviously, for, spoiler's sake, but you get the idea. Story definitely needed a lot more work. Don't know what went on with it. Definitely at the end, it almost felt cheap, the cutscenes also. And it's not a case of me just choosing the bad ending or getting the wrong one. It generally felt like they just ran out of time and didn't bother with certain things at the end. But I digress. I've said it's not the most important thing, but just to recognise that it wasn't that great. It started off well, just went through some muddly changes, and by the end some of the characters, what they were doing, it's just like, god damn it, why couldn't you just stop and tell me what was going on, and then maybe I would have avoided getting my leg chomped on by 200 zombies this whole time. There are some good points though. Some of the characters are absolutely amazing. Hakan and Luan are fantastic. I felt warmth, I felt humour, I felt good stuff going on. I also was pretty pleased with some of the side missions, side characters and NPCs. A lot of it was quite humorous. Sure, there's plenty of other characters that were like, yep, left for dead. I literally didn't care about what happened to them, and the acting behind it was a bit off, or certainly dialogue choices felt just a bit weird sometimes, like they were completely not clued in about what they were actually talking about in terms of scenes. But I loved Hakon, I loved absolutely hanging around with him, I thought he was really super cool, and definitely one of the bright spots. That's why I was filled with such hope at the beginning. Lots of the side missions were pretty generic, but like I said, yeah, some of them were just funny and I quite enjoyed meeting some of these characters. But again, they should have worked more on some of these characters either returning or making you care more about them, especially when it comes to choices. And that's a big part of the game, supposedly, your choices matter. They really don't. Like, you get one final decision to make and it doesn't really matter how well you've gone through stuff or not gone through stuff. It doesn't seem like it affects the final decision at all. I'm being a little bit vague there, but I don't want to spoil it too much for people. So don't buy this game for like Mass Effect levels of great story. Buy it because you do want to run around an open world and the story's the secondary concern. And what a world it is. I loved the world of Dying Light. I felt like the starter region was fantastic, and then when we got onto the loop and some of the surrounding areas, it was great. The verticality, where you explore, run around using the upgrades for your paraglider, which you'll eventually get, it was great. It gave you that sense of freedom. That combination with your parkour skills felt like the parkour was on point. I'm playing on a PC, a pretty high-end one, so the graphics were never going to be too much of a problem, but I do respect and understand that consoles will have a very different view of stuff. But for me, the colours felt good, they weren't really awash with horribleness, and the FPS was just about decent. But yeah, even on my beast of a 390, there was still some issues. But I've got to say, I was pretty impressed with the huge amount of buildings they've got, the amount of enemies, zombies roaming around, stuff that you can pick up. That's a lot for performance for any game, and I felt like it responded just about well on the PC. And this is what you want to hear. If you love open world RPGs, you want to know that there's a billion things to go around and do. There's maps to explore galore, and it's going to take you hours and hours to find every little secret or little Easter egg, as well as all the side quest missions. Kind of one disappointment with the map, I guess, is the last few zones really feel like they were just kind of rush jobbed in, like they just didn't have time to really make them more interesting or something unique or different. They're basically no-go zones that you kind of meant to just rush through, and I guess it kind of does fit in and suit the story at that point. So despite the map looking that big, it does kind of limit as much as you would think how much you can explore, and is it actually worthwhile exploring some parts of it. And the very fact that you don't unlock some areas, or you don't really have to go and spend time in them unless you're actually doing after game activities after the main story, yeah, that's a bit surprising, I guess. The parkour is absolutely spot on. It does feel a bit floaty at the beginning, I think everyone's been saying that, but once you get used to it, I felt like it was best I've played in terms of traversal. I vaguely remember playing Mirror's Edge, the first one, like donkeys years ago, and it was good, but I felt like this was decent. Yeah, I had my moments sometimes where I was kind of angry that I didn't grab onto a ledge when I thought I had and stuff, but most of the time I felt like, man, if you see it, you can climb it. That's not strictly true. Obviously there are actually some restrictions on what you can climb and what can't, and it does get a lot easier once you start getting more of your parkour skills. But for sure, I felt like the world was decent. It was one of the best I've seen in terms of playability. It was basically fun getting across the map, so in that respect the parkour is amazing. When it works. There's definitely more of a slant towards parkour side quests or challenges rather than combat ones. I don't think I even partook in one combat challenge. I think there's something like an arena where you can go and fight some goons or something like that, or maybe take on some zombies with a special weapon, but I was just so disinterested with combat by then already that I just wasn't that bothered. So if you're someone that likes mastering this kind of stuff, especially the parkour side, then the challenges would be great. But again, yeah, they didn't really mix it up. Not until much later in the game if you go really super hard looking for Easter eggs like this special flying broom challenge. It's nothing you've not seen though when it comes to the actual random events or some of them side missions. It's basically go here, free someone, fight some bandits, maybe chase a runaway zombie. I honestly don't think there's a single new kind of mini quest, side mission, random objective I haven't seen in any other game. There's nothing new in terms of systems at play here. It's just more streamlined a little bit. They've made it almost more approachable for like every kind of player, I would say, as the game is definitely easier. I would whack it up to hard if you're an experienced open world player. I had it on easy at the beginning just so I wanted to get through and make some guides on locations and stuff, and then I had to turn it up because it was just way too easy. And from reports I've seen, even on the normal settings, it becomes way too easy. So there's definitely some balancing issues there, and it does feel a bit like you don't really run into a hardship with enemies until much later in the game. Throughout my 50 hours in the game, bearing in mind a lot of that was just mooching about trying to find Easter eggs and stuff, I really only got chased maybe 3 times. It never got to a level 4. It is a little bit too easy in that respect. You can just run around at night time without too much danger. The UV zones and stuff like that, they really make it so that you're never too far from being safe. Now the new mechanic is that you're infected, and that every few minutes you've got to take some immunization, inhaler, or get to that UV light to reset it. And I love this. This was probably the one thing that was close to being something new and fresh and different. But because there's so much of the UV places around, and even more that you can start unlocking, it just never becomes much of a challenge, and you get a bunch of immunization stuff. By midpoint, like after 10 hours, I had more than enough resources to craft and gather my own, or just go ahead and buy some, so it was never really a problem. So for sure, I would have loved to have seen more use of this kind of stuff, more maybe reliance on bigger waves of enemies chasing you or bigger events. In terms of zombies itself as well, it's a big complaint I've seen from others that there aren't as many hordes and stuff, and that's absolutely correct. There's no way near as many as I tried even in the first few hours of Dying Light that I did play as the first game. So I think it will be contentious with some fans, but in appealing to new players, I think this has absolutely done a great job in terms of making it just a bit more approachable from the early stages all throughout. You can basically do everything in bite-sized chunks. There's more little dungeons, there's more little encounters you'll come across where you've got to clear out some of the GRE facilities or come across some convoy, and it's all just a little bit more bite-sized. You don't have to panic that stuff's going to go wrong all the time. I think, like I said, some of that could have been thrown in a bit more. It would have been nice to have a bit more randomness, and maybe that's something they'll work on. That's the other factor. Everything I'm saying you could take with a pinch of salt, because some of this stuff I'm sure will be improved on in the next few years. They promise to support the game for 5 years, but some systems feel like they're too baked in. Like, what could you do? Straight off, I'd add the ability to remod weapons. That is one of the biggest crimes, that you can't really keep a weapon beyond its first stages. Sure, you can upgrade the mods on them, and that does add a lot more abilities and power and damage numbers to them, but it is a bit baffling why you can't do more. And I kind of feel like they could have gone a bit more crazy. Some of the weapons you'll find have got great sounding names, great looks, but they all generally do the same thing. Combat isn't the greatest in Dying Light 2. The parkour is amazing, but when it comes to the combat, yeah, it's pretty much swing, swing, swing. You're meant to use the environment, and you're meant to use like special dodges and possibly blocks to then start up like a quick jump and then kick to another enemy, but it never really chains together. I mean, I'm not expecting Arkham Knight style kind of combat, but damn, it kind of was weak sauce, as were some of the skills. Some of this shit is so basic. You really telling me I've got to put 3000 XP or 9000 XP into being able to hold onto a ledge? So much more could have been done with the skills. I mean, I guess they don't want it to be too crazy, but this is a game about zombies. Go big. I'm not talking Saints Row level of like madness, but certainly we could have had some of these skills being a little bit more off the wall. Do you get it? Off the wall parkour? Yeah. You'll have no problem unlocking all these, or the ones that are most important anyway. By the time I'd completed the story, I'd unlocked the majority of the parkour points and the combat ones that I thought were interesting enough, and I managed to live by without most of them. So I don't know if they're going to add more to this. They will, like I said, support the game for 5 years, and it will be events and story and DLC and stuff, but it feels like some of these systems are stuck there now, and they can't really go too mad. But I hope to be proved wrong. Maybe they can add another tier of skills for players that have completed the story. I would also like to meet whoever has decided to put a fucking lockpick on every single item box you come across in the game. This is the tedious shit going. You're meant to be able to get skills that upgrade it so that you can just force the locks, and it basically makes it a lot easier, but you still have to actually do the action even when you've upgraded it to its max. It's pretty annoying, as is the million times I had to go and collect loot from bodies and get absolutely nothing. Just give us a loot all button for fuck's sake. In these times, this is where the kind of age of the game, like, it feels like this game should have come out 4 or 5 years ago, and it may have been acceptable, but nowadays it's just long. It really feels like there's a bunch of systems here they were going to flesh out and just didn't have time. The weapons, they look, as I said, unique. They kind of sound unique, but they don't really do that much difference. You've literally got 2 types, slash and blunt damage. That is it. Like, there's nothing really special or unique about this. The fact that there's no firearms in the game, I know, has pissed some people off. I can live without that, I can, but at least make the weapons do different things. Make the combat different. After the 50th time of running across a bunch of zombies or bandits, I kind of just started to avoid them or get the objective and quickly get out there because it just became a bit too boring. The skills make it sound like you're meant to be using the environment, as I said, to really enhance that combat, but they just don't really tie in together. You just don't really get that sense that you could be running rings about enemies because it's just all too much. Either you're fighting zombies in corridors, or if you're in the outside world, some of the enemies are just not close enough to walls that you can really utilise to do a flying kick on and stuff. And once you do master a special flying kick, that jumping kick, oh my god, it's OP. Add to that the grapple, you can pull enemies as well later on, and yeah, combat becomes super easy even on higher difficulties. When it comes to classes, you're meant to have like medic, brawler, tank and ranger, but you don't really get to utilise ranger until much later in the game when you finally unlock bows. that level 3, and maybe even the crossbow if you chose the right faction. And then the other classes, I just felt like it was underbaked. You've got all these random bits of gear and weapons with arbitrary stats that only make a bit of a difference if you really going all out to do something like parkour for a little while, or you want a bit extra stamina for your actual paraglider. And it's so fiddly changing all of your gear and your equipment that becomes an absolute chore, and I just gave up half the time. Even if I did have some gear that would be better to do a bit of stealth or running around to take on some enemies, I didn't want to have to sit through the menus. So one thing they've got to add soon, as soon as possible, is loadouts. I didn't mind too much the upgrading of your equipment, making that your bombs would be more powerful if you decided to sink points into them. You need to collect a whole bunch of zombie tokens, so it's kind of forcing you to go and do combat against some of the hardest zombies. But it's not really that necessary. You can probably just get by without it and just keep buying new stuff or new consumables, so it's kind of a wasted effort. And some features like the UV flashlight that you get towards the end, you barely use as well, again as part of the main story at least, or you don't really need it. It really does feel like, again, a lot of content was cut, or maybe they're saving it for the future, more harder encounters possibly. I'm sure there'll be plenty of min-maxers disagreeing with me. No, yeah, if you do this you can get 20% extra parkour XP. And some stuff like that is great if you do want to go on that grind. But again, you get a bunch of stuff in here pretty leveled pretty easily. I've seen a bunch of stupid farming XP videos. Oh, get 1000 XP per minute. Bro, I can get 3000 XP plus extra bonuses, rewards and combat XP just by doing a side mission. This is not a game that you have to farm XP. You can get by with the majority of the skills without unlocking every one of them. They added a few new zombie types and they rejigged some of the volatiles and stuff. You never meet them. Like literally, you meet one zombie in the first stages of the tutorial, some sort of shrieker or banshee. I never saw it ever again. I've not come across one single drowned zombie. They woefully underuse some of these. Maybe I'll meet more of them if I go ahead and carry on clearing out all the GRE complexes or some of the Forsaken stores and stuff, but it did feel like it was just way too many of the biters and the general ones. There just wasn't really anything exciting. Lots of spitters, lots of the screamers that alert the other Zeds, but none of the big ones. Like, they should have had more focus on them, like attacking you, especially since there was so many other safe spots that you could run to. It would have been nice if there was more random events with some of the hardest zombies in the game. And I guess the only other slight letdown, it was kind of the factions. Like, you're meant to side with one or the other, and again, I'm not going to go too much into the story with this, but the results are that you get more traps and stuff if you side with peacekeepers, and you're meant to get more parkour sort of equipment scattered across the map if you side with the survivors. One of the rewards for getting to faction 4 in the peacekeepers is you get a crossbow. There is nothing equivalent in the survivors, and that felt like a major letdown, like forcing you to side with one faction because it gives you access to a weapon you can't get anywhere else in the game. And all in all, this was all weak sauce. I never really felt like there was a huge difference, never felt like there was beyond a few card traps. I only got it up to level 4, but yeah, it just didn't feel that useful or needed. Maybe if the world had more zombies in it, maybe if the hordes were running around a bit more, I can understand there being more traps and stuff, but at no point did it feel like I needed the traps to survive on a daily basis running around the world. So that kind of makes me feel like, you're better off going down the survivor route to get more of the actual parkour stuff to just help you get around, get through the map a lot quicker and easier. Hopefully they can ramp stuff up and make it more meaningful, that you do utilise these traps more. Certainly it just never felt like that in my runtime. So fingers crossed they can improve that in the future, maybe do something, add more zombies to it, or make some more of the side missions a bit more dynamic in using the world and the environment. There's some puzzle elements where you've got to supply power to water stations or electrical stations, and yeah, these were okay. I guess it broke up the game a little bit and gave you something else to concentrate and do from just the parkour and the zombie slaying. But overall, I felt like the factions needed just a bit more meat on them. Anyhow, I've already gone too long. I said I was going to keep this under 15 minutes to myself, and we're way over. Should you buy Dying Light 2? If you enjoyed the first one, I think you'll enjoy the second one enough. I think you'll be a bit dismayed that a lot of the options have been made more simple and you don't have as much freedom to go ahead and create and craft, and you may be a bit upset that the difficulty isn't as hard as the first, judging by what a lot of my rat bags have been telling me. Should you buy this game if you're a casual, you're someone that doesn't really dip into these games that often? I gotta say, I would probably wait until either it has a few more little content updates, a few more improvements, or possibly it does go on sale a little bit. I don't think it's necessarily worth sinking 40 or 50 hours in just yet. You're not gonna have like this amazing transformative experience. But I don't think people buy open world games for this. This is something I've been seeing a lot of reviews comment and talk about the story and this and that and everything else. I think people miss the point. Most people who like these types of games, you really want them to be time sinks. You just want something to chill, to mooch with, and you can absolutely do that with Dying Light 2. There's bucket loads of content, even if it does get a bit old, repetitive, or nothing you haven't seen before. After 50 hours of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I was done. I didn't want to have to do another freaking monastery mission or have to wade through even more hours. I didn't even finish the story in that game because it was so goddamn long. I really respect that Dying Light actually gives you the option that you could probably boost through the story in about 20 hours and then you've only got 480 hours of side content if you want it. That is actually a real positive. The story isn't so woven in the game that you have to sit there for hundreds of hours if you don't really want to. If you do want to just enjoy a fresh story, something new, then yes, you can get through this game pretty rapidly and then decide to take on all the other stuff. If you gave me an option, buying this or maybe Far Cry 6, I would absolutely choose this over Far Cry 6. It's no Ghost of Tsushima, which I thought was amazing, but it is a decent enough little open world survival game. Just maybe built for the wrong generation. In terms of graphics and bugs, I know, like I said, Xbox and PlayStation, you might have had more issues, and for sure, I reckon there will be a bit of time before they're all corrected and fixed. But it's no Cyberpunk. I have not come across as big a negative reception or the state of the game being as bad as that on consoles. So yeah, I think you're probably going to be alright. Maybe give it another couple weeks for another couple patches to get the optimal experience. Is that right for a game that was delayed multiple times and probably meant to have come out years ago? No, not really, not when you've spent so much money on it most likely, but this is the point, these games evolve now. We know, like I said, they're getting more content, so if you're a fan, you've got the patience, you're someone that can dip in and out of a game, then it might be worth the investment now. The major glitch I had was the fast travel stopped working after about 40 hours. For some reason it just kept saying I was stuck in a mission, so I couldn't use the fast travel, and it stayed like that even after the first wave of patches. I did have a rebooting or black screen continuously after one particular mission near the end. In fact, I was about to rage as it was one of the final ones, but I managed to fix it by going online and then starting a new session and then coming offline, quickly saving it. That kind of stuff is not acceptable, like game breaking, glitches, stuff that stops you progressing I can't stand, and Dying Light does seem to have a few of them still at the moment, so yeah, definitely wait a couple of weeks if you're someone that really can't stand that either. But glitches with zombies and other stuff, maybe going through the terrain or things just getting a bit stuck or a bit cheesy, that's all stuff I can live with easily. So there you go, my opinion. Hopefully I'll give you a bit of warning of what to expect. Some of the systems at play, I'm not a professional reviewer. I generally, like I said, only do reviews if I really love a game or really hate it. This game is an average game with fantastic parkour and some nice characters, but the story isn't great and there's definitely a whole lot of systems that could definitely do with a bit more work on. Make the world more dynamic, make events happen more, make it more dangerous and make us use the environment more, especially when you've been helping out each faction. A bang average open world game that I'm sure lots of you guys are going to really enjoy if you like it. If you're not that keen on games like these, this isn't going to change your mind. Check out the rest of the guides. I'm going to carry on for another week making them and then it's on to Horizon Forbidden West. Until next time, ratbags, laters.